Yo guys, how are ya? Hope you are doing awesome. It's your man Andre here from Financial Fortress. And today I would like to talk about one of the companies from my portfolio, right? Because I've been asked about this one quite a number of times and I've been invested in the company for, well, now it's over a year and it's a company that's misunderstood kind of fundamentally, right? There is a lot of fear, uncertainty, doubt, and lots of misinformation because recently there were some basically attacks on the company from one of the big finance names. But yeah, the company is Palantir, and I will try in this video to give you a little bit of overview what Palantir does and if it's something that might make sense maybe for you, your portfolio, if it's something that you would like to research on a deeper level. So let's get to it. Okay. So obviously every successful analysis of the company starts with the big picture, right? You need to understand what does the company do, how they make money, and where they are heading for the future, right? And future, that's exactly something that's exciting about Palantir because fundamentally it's a company that works with data. If I should sum it up in one short sentence or paragraph, I would basically say that Palantir helps you to make a decisions that might save you, let's say, 10 million dollars for a contract that costs you 1 million, right? So there is this um, exponential value that you are getting, because obviously if you are working with data in any modern enterprise, and we are talking, could be either big companies, medium-sized companies, or the government, you are having a lot of data that you are collecting from different stuff, right? Could be data about people, processes, materials, products, and data is basically going to be a very important part of the world moving forward because there is simply so much of it, and at the same time it really allows you to get that edge. If you know how to basically puzzle all those pieces together, it gives you a lot of advantage compared to your competitors. So basically Palantir started you know almost 20 years ago, and first it was basically kind of the governmental contractor, let's say. So they were basically providing consultancy, which in itself is relatively complicated business model, right? Because you are always just trading your time or the time of your employees for some kind of a fee that's, could be fixed, could be hourly based, but it's definitely hard to scale, right? It's basically, from its nature, it's kind of impossible. So that's definitely frowned upon as an investor to look into some companies that are into the consultancy. However, then there is basically the kind of the holy grail of investors, and that's software as a service, because you developed it once and then you can just sell it to all your clients with very little of additional overhead. And that's basically where Palantir is at the moment, right? They started as this, kind of a customized contractor, taking a long time to develop their expertise. And they are now at this stage where they are basically transitioning into proper software as a service company and massively scaling, especially their commercial side, because okay, they've been working for the government for a long time, but now it's time to basically deploy their software all across the board, starting kind of the basically from the top, right? They had the government as their first client, and now they are going basically downstream concerning their total addressable market, where they are working with huge companies and medium-sized companies and moving to smaller and smaller. So how does, for example, this working with the data look like on a big scale level? Imagine you are, for example, Airbus, right? putting assembling airplanes, which is obviously a huge piece of machinery with tens of thousands, hundreds of thousand pieces, which are again puzzled together, and they need to be all delivered to a certain location, assembled. There needs to be a lot of quality control. Airline industry is obviously one of the most tightly controlled, obviously because of all the demands for the safety. And exactly, Palantir is something that can help you tremendously with all those operations, right? Because I've been listening to some of the interviews with CEOs of companies that are working with Palantir, and they are all basically saying the same, right? That the Palantir really gives you that exponential advantage, right? Maybe there was some assembly process that initially took maybe 2 months, and thanks to all the optimization and working with all the data, they were able to scale it down to maybe just a couple of days, right? And obviously, if you can make that advantage, that's all the saved, could be saved materials, obviously saved time, saved labor cost. So the advantages for companies that are working with Palantir are really tremendous. So that was basically kind of the high level overview, so you can understand the Palantir. And now let's take a look at a little bit of the recent development, the stock price, and the controversy that's also associated with the Palantir, because there's definitely something we cannot easily discount. So let's move on. Palantir went public in October 2020, and it was a direct public offering, meaning that they didn't raise any additional capital, and they haven't issued any new shares. However, it made the company public in a kind of the move to basically expand more on that commercial side, basically build alongside that governmental part. And as you can see from basically this graph, since the direct public offering, the price basically went up crazily over the first couple of months, peaking in basically late January 2021, which was kind of the top for lots of these growth stories, specs. It was this crazy period, right? It seemed like basically quote unquote valuations don't matter, right? It was all about the big picture, looking 3-5 years out, basically looking for hype. But of course, that kind of the market slowly bled out over the second half of 2021, with lots of those growth stories being decimated, like lots of those companies that, for example, Cathy Wood is holding, like T-Dog, or companies like Lemonade. Again, great companies with a good or great business model. However, those that are not free cash flow positive, or they might have some roadmap being profitable down the road, but it might be relatively far out in the future. And kind of the similar happened to Palantir, even though I would not group them together with lots of those kind of the retail hype growth stories, because in a sense, if we just want to go on a little bit tangent here, if you exclude the stock-based compensation, Palantir is basically a free cash flow positive, and they are having lots of money on the balance sheet as well. So their balance sheet is both basically pristine, and they are free cash flow positive. So that's amazing, right? We have this basically out of the way, right? It's not a company that you might expect it to go under, or there is in a sense a limited downside. But of course, as with all the kind of tech companies, they are always looking many years ahead for value that's going to be created in the future, right? So it's a little bit tricky to find what should be the correct price for the stock. And so that's why in this growth story there is a lot of price discovery. So as I mentioned, right, recently, I mean, basically now Palantir is at, is it basically, yeah, I mean, we are basically now at the 52-week low, and obviously, with Palantir, such a great company at such a tempting price, um, well, at least for me, right? But I did my my due diligence. And if you want to, look a little bit more deeper into the financials, then definitely check out the links in the description, because in Financial Fortress, in our network, our in-house CPA Beatrice, she did a full breakdown of the basically Palantir's balance sheet and income statement to kind of look more into the financial, and she's obviously more qualified to speak on that side than I am. Um, so that's about the recent action, right, in the Palantir. So you can see that it's been very volatile over the past year, and now it's up to us to kind of look what might be in the future. But there's also been lots of controversy recently, right? And that's the second thing I would like to talk about. And it basically boils down to the fact that obviously Palantir and their software is it's a tool, right? And it depends what do you use it for. And there are some amazing things the Palantir is doing that are definitely helping us on a big scale. They are helping with the distribution of the vaccines. That's obviously something very important these days, as well as, for example, as I mentioned, lots of manufacturing, helping the airlines to keep everything on schedule. Um, but then there is the important part that's that's basically on that negative side or the controversial side, because obviously Palantir is still a governmental contractor involved with um, some of the obviously military branches, with the CIA, there were some controversy with ICE, and that can also put some, in a sense, negative light, or also just um, this fact that Palantir is involved with the politics, right? And obviously some of the people just simply don't want to have anything with the company like this. That's basically political, right? Because Palantir is very vocal about their political standing, especially Alex Karp, and they are basically concerning their whole mission statement. They are um, aligned with the Western principle. They are working only with the with the companies and governments that are either US based or allies of the US, right? So they are definitely not friends of China or any of the controversial regimes around the world. But of course, again, it's a politic, right? And if you got involved in the politics, that definitely puts a certain stamp on you. So then you have people like Ross Gerber, who basically had a crazy outburst on one of the podcasts recently. I will also link it in the comment if you want to check that interview with Ross Gerber, where he's basically very emotional outburst, where he goes like Palantir is the worst company ever. They are basically Nazis helping CIA to track you and sell the data to the highest bidder, which is obviously fundamentally broken statement. And it seems like Ross's outburst was definitely an emotional, due to some reason, maybe behind the scenes. It's hard to estimate what might prompt this. However, if someone like Ross, who has, I think, at the moment over 2 billion of assets under management, if I'm not mistaken, if he has this opinion on the Palantir, then obviously it might be opinion of many people, kind of across the board, big fund manager. Doesn't matter, right? So if you are invested in Palantir, then you definitely need to understand that it's going to be a rough path. That's all I want to say about that. So that was basically about the second chapter, and let's dive a little deeper. Okay. And now I would also like to touch about, kind of my expectations for the future for the company, right? And what I'm looking into as an investor in Palantir, right? And obviously Palantir is a growth stock, right? They are having an amazing year over year and month over month growth, which obviously is attributed mainly to their kind of going for that commercial parts, right? And that's kind of their at the same time biggest challenge at this point, right? Because they are having this amazing uh, product slash service that is really giving the customers like significant advantage compared to their competitors. But of course now it's important to sell it, right? And to explain all this to the potential companies when you are, doing those massive contracts, because obviously it's very expensive to work with Palantir, because as I mentioned, right, it's something on a magnitude that maybe you are having contract for maybe 5, 10, 25 5 millions. But of course that investment might get back to you tenfold, right? But of course you need to understand what Palantir does and how they operate, and basically have uh, certain proof of concept, right? The more and more companies are working with them, the better. So that's for me the most important part kind of going forward, right? Because obviously the management team has this ambitious goal. But as with all the growth stock, right, lots of that revenue and profit is in the future, right? So we are basically paying for something that might be very well amazing, but again, it's not now. It's 3, 5, 7 years out, and that's of course why the growth of car having these price fluctuations, right? Because it's simply much more based on the perception and all the valuation models we are doing, right? Because if some of the parameters in the models change just relatively slightly, it can give you a very different result. So for me as a person, retail investor and invested in the Palantir, it's very much important to track the contracts they are making with the different companies, looking both into the quality and the quantity, right? That they are basically able to fuel that growth that they are expecting, right? Because they are having this roadmap that you know that outlook that is outlined in their presentation, and I basically need to check up with Palantir every once in a while to kind of see if they are delivering on their promises. So, for example, this is, one of the news that came out today, that Palantir Technologies expands in South Korea. So Hyundai Heavy Industries Group and Palantir Technologies, a leading builder of operating systems for the modern enterprise, will collaborate to build a big data platform for HAI's core businesses, including shipbuilding and offshore engineering. So again, like this is like prime case of what Palantir does, right? Working with those big enterprises, building amazing products that are super complex. So this is definitely a piece of news that I want to see, that again they were able to acquire new customer, which is most likely, I don't know if it's stated in this press release. It's probably not, right. It's also nice to have some kind of a grasp what the size of the contract might be. Of course, we will get an overview of kind of the contracts in their quarterly presentation, and from that we can basically extrapolate, and they are also putting it into their quarterly presentation, how many contracts they are basically having at this point, going into the future, what's kind of the runway, right, if they are delivering those promises. Because basically at this point, or as per their latest 10Q, they are having a runway of 3.6 billions of contracts, for 2022, 2023, and onward. So that's the most important point, right? They've obviously products amazing. They are still improving it, putting money into more research and development. Amazing. But as an investor, I want to see that they are clicking on the all cylinders concerning sales, and that their product is getting more and more widely recognized. Uh, and yeah, that's about it. That's kind of the overview of the Palantir, right? So let me take you home. So that was a relatively simple overview of Palantir. If you've liked it, then definitely like, subscribe, tell your neighbor this kind of stuff. And also consider joining us inside the private group, right? Because there you can see my whole valuation model for the Palantir concerning what we expect for the revenue, net income over the next 5 years, as well as overview from our whole team, right? We are having a team of coaches who are specialized in different areas. We have, for example, Coach Tom with 20 years of experience from banking and credit card industry. We have Coach Beatrice, who is licensed CPA, and many others with different outlooks, as well as 3,000 members already inside. So come and join us. The link is in the description, and peace.